right. Well, welcome everybody. This is the fourth of four Saturday brief introductory sessions introducing the work of Living Resilience, which is my little organization online and podcast and support groups and courses and so on. I'm Dean Walker. I'm calling in from Southern Oregon, beautiful downtown Medford, Oregon. It is a glorious fall day here in Southern Oregon, my favorite time of year on the West Coast. There's Joe. Hi there, Joe.
Good afternoon, Dean. You're looking as well as last week.
Thank you. You look like you are in a very sunny and pleasant place, I might add.
I am 30 minutes south of Atlanta. It's probably 85 degrees. Unusually warm, but I'm not complaining.
All right. Well, good to see you. You're just arriving as I'm doing the official welcome to not only us who are on the screen, but also the folks who will watch this recording. So this is the fourth of four introductory series, series of 1 hour sessions that are meant to be hopefully a little bit more flesh on the bones in answering the question, what is this thing? What is living resilience? Who's the audience? What do we do? And so on. Hopefully that's been effective. And hopefully those who'll be watching this recording will have watched the first three. And one thing I can say is that I'm going to do my very best to have this be the one default episode of this series, that if you only have time for one, this would be the one. So we're going to start off with a very brief check-in from each person, perhaps 2 words a piece to just presence us and get us going. Then I'm going to recap a little bit about each of the last 3 sessions of this thing. And then I'm just guessing here that those of you who are on the screen now, who are participating in this live way, that I'm pretty much preaching to the choir here. And so I'm preaching as much to myself as I am to you. I'm preaching about my own practices, my own experience of these extraordinary troubled times that we're in, and what it is to access truly extraordinary, perhaps equally or even greater skills and inner states of being, and what some people might call the implicit senses and the implicit system that is a part of us that has us use words like interbeing or a sense of oneness, that universal expansion feeling. These are the elements that I'd like to get to today, because as you may have heard in my layouts and certainly in our sharing back and forth in these earlier sessions, we are living in the most extraordinary and challenging time in human history. I'm about to do a recap, so I might just save that. But I've been leaning toward this session and these deeper practices and these deeper states of being that we can share as a set of shared inner resources to indeed face these times. I'm looking forward to this conversation. This is where my system lights up. This is really worth getting out of bed for, even in the worst possible interpretation of these times. This is the real deal for me. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here. If I could ask if it's possible for y'all, we have Joe and Lissy and Carol haven't heard much from each person, some nothing from a couple, yeah. So if we could turn on videos and turn on audios, and we can do a very brief check-in. I'd like to get us connected that way, and then off we go. So I'm going to give you an example of the brief check in that I'd like to hear from you. Again, I'm Dean Walker. I live in Southern Oregon. I've been connected with this work for a long time, with the greater collapse aware community for a long time. And two words that I would use to describe what I'm bringing to this session: anticipation and appreciation. So that's me. And Emma Mary, could I ask you to check in a similar way?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm from the UK. It's more than 2 words. Physically very tired, but mentally very open and ready.
Great, thank you. All right. Carol, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm from Saskatchewan, Canada. It's the Prairie Provinces. It's about 3 hours north of Minot, North Dakota. They're right in the middle of Canada. And our climate change and things haven't been that disastrous so far. Things are changing, but it hasn't been drastic. The weather is definitely changing and being more unpredictable. And I was starting to be aware of the predicament that the world is in about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years now, from Michael Dowd. He had an interview with Richard Rohr, and it was just kind of, I realized then, and then of course now sort of have immersed myself into all the books and the readings and realized that this is the way it is and this is reality. So other than that, before then I was a little naive. I thought that life would just carry on as usual forever. Forever and ever, amen. Kind of thing. And
Yeah,
I'm realizing now not the case.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's quite a threshold moment that you're describing. Yeah, thank you. And Joe, would you mind checking in?
Okay. Joseph Garafola, like I said before, south of Atlanta. I guess the two words, if I had to add three words, would be presence, grace, and impermanence. My father told me many years ago when I was young, birth has a bad prognosis. So, in other words, we're all in a state of flux. Now, obviously, what's happening now is a lot of human centric issues. And I've come to believe that it's more out of ignorance, more out of avidya, not traditional ignorance, but ignorance in the sense of not understanding absolute reality. So, yes, there's some bad actors, but it's not a James Bond movie. I just think that, man has been, we've co opted too much of the earth, its planets, and its resources, more in an attempt to settle some, more for the lack of an inner life that we're voraciously consuming an outer life. But at the end of a talk, Dean, I'd like to put out a bit of an alert. I'm saying, but I won't steal your thunder now. I got some interesting news from some friends of mine up in Wall Street, of all places. So give me a few minutes at the end, and I will. Obviously, it won't be the best of news, but I would rather know the prognosis or trajectory of what's happening, so as not to be blindsided.
Yeah. Well, Joe, actually, I appreciate the kind of the warning, or the kind of looking ahead to the end of the session today. But what I would suggest is that if there's a brief version of what you'd like to share with us, this is I think a far better time to get us kind of going, because we're going to start in the business as usual paradigm as a recap. And that sounds like it's a good spot to put in the kind of update you want to give us.
Yeah. So again, like I was saying before about impermanence, the other thing, I'm a long time Buddhist practitioner, and they talk about the 12 links of interdependence. So everything is one happening, one taste. So you cannot study one thing without attempting to study or look at everything or as much as you can hold. So another friend of mine besides Michael Dowd is a guy named Chris Martinson, who people may be familiar with. Chris started a great website that I recommend people following called Peak Prosperity, prospering as the world changes. And Chris is famous. He's a guy who worked. He's a guy who worked in corporate America. He worked for Pfizer. He's got all kinds of degrees, advanced degrees in biochemistry from Duke University. But Chris became famous right before the last crash in 2008 by coming out with something called the crash course. So the crash course is literally a crash course in the 4 E's: energy, economy, ecology, and equity, because they're all interrelated, amongst other things. So Chris and another friend of mine who's been on Wall Street for 40 years, we are approaching, or we're in the midst of a Lehman Brothers moment. So if people remember, 2008 started with Bear Stearns and Lehman Brothers, and obviously what we've done over the last 14 years is insane. I mean, here in America, we've printed as much money in the last 2 years as the previous 230 years. So they're trying to stopgap a lot of problems, but two major banks, Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank, and the entire English pound are all collapsing. So it's like dominoes, unfortunately, because everything is interdependent. So
Yeah.
So again, and then I'll end it here. Just be, careful. Watch this closely as it unfolds in the next days or few weeks, because your money in your bank is not even safe. In other words, I've been telling people, build community, look into the 8 forms of capital by permaculture: knowledge capital, social capital, material capital.
Mhm.
That's the,
Okay.
so
So
we're on
Joe,
the
what I hear you saying, Joe, is that we're at what Chris Martinson and others are suggesting. This is a pivotal moment, like we've seen a few other pivotal moments. But I think what you're also implying is these are cumulative and they're growing exponentially in their scale. So I'm hearing you kind of put up a larger than usual red flag, like this is really one to watch.
Yes, because we're talking about currencies possibly collecting, sovereign
Right.
debt.
Right.
And again,
Okay.
all this was baked into the cake. But
Sure.
again, take care of your neighbors,
Yeah.
maybe stop some extra things. And, again, this whole course,
Okay.
what you're doing, it's deep adaptation. But go ahead, Dean.
Right.
Thank
Well,
you.
yeah, and thank you for that. I appreciate you kind of giving us the condensed version, and that is what this work is about. This the long version of the radio, the elevator pitch for this work is that we offer transformative support and resources to people bravely facing human-caused collapse of Earth and human systems. And I heard each of those elements implied in what you just shared with us, Joe. So thank you. And the short version of the radio, God, why do I keep saying radio instead of elevator? The short version of the elevator pitch for this work is profound resources facing troubled times. So whether our attention is on things at the economic level or the societal level or the corporatized level, or if it's more in terms of the environmental concerns, species extinction and habitat destruction, and on the list goes. We each have our things that most show up on our screen, things that are most important to us. And that's what I've been trying to lay out in terms of how this work addresses that. And we started out in the first layer, and we've been using a roughly adapted scale from a guy named Paul Chafurka, who gave us this scale, which he calls stages of awareness, where we can look at the very first level, which is the business as usual level. That's everything that Joe's been talking about, but it's not seen as something's wrong. It just seems like this is what we call normal, and this is how it's going, and we'll just plow ahead and fix things as we do because we always do, and so on and so on. That's back in number one, and there are really no resilience skills to speak of there. We're an extremely fragile and fragile global culture. And I think we need only look as far as the responses to various global large-scale weather events that are have been going on for the past few years running. And then also with the pandemic, gave us a real view of just how fragile our systems are. And so when we step up a level in these past 3 sessions, we've been stepping up a level or more in each of the levels of stages of awareness. And at the next level, we get shaken out of the sleepiness, the stupor that we can be in culturally, globally, nationally. Something gets our attention. Right now, it could be hurricanes here in the States, or it could be fires at various places around the planet. It could be floods. You know, I'm just thinking of Pakistan, and it's just absolutely breathtaking, and so on. So something gets our attention, and it could be something quite personal. It could be I've lost my job because my entire industry is challenged in this time, and so on. And at each level, there's similarly a level of resilience skills, of skills that we might use to just kind of rally ourselves and bring ourselves back to standing if something has knocked us off center, knocked us off track. And at each, from starting at the very beginning, it's as rustic or as simple, as basic a set of skills as one can imagine. You know, they actually teach these kind of basic self-regulation and co-regulation skills, meaning how do I bring myself back to center, or co-regulation, meaning how do I bring myself and my little group of family who are sleeping together in the high school gym during the hurricane, how do we bring ourselves back to center, back to relationship, back to a coherence after being traumatized, if you will, by the event. So there are some basic skills that can be taught at that level, but there's nothing about fundamental change there. There's nothing about fundamentally shifting the polarization and the deep divides that are around the world now chronically. Those early skill sets are really the kind of motto, if you will, of those early levels of stages of awareness. Is basically something like, let's hurry up and as soon as possible get back to normal. That's as good as it gets on that scale. So those are good and important skills to have, those basic skills, but that is not much of a target in terms of growing ourselves, evolving ourselves, or at least enhancing our skill set to be more and more present instead of more and more fragile. So that, in a very tight nutshell, gives us a little bit of a recap of what we've covered in sessions 1, 2, and 3. It actually is just a little bit shy of number 3, which is where we started to talk about if a person has that one problem, that one thing that smacked them, so to speak, and got our attention, and had us start to realize maybe things aren't okay. Maybe we need to do something to rally at some way, at least be more prepared for the next hurricane. Sometimes there's enough of an impetus there for a person to start to look at, wait a second, I've never really cared for this whole conversation about climate change, and I really don't care about the environment much. I really care about my family and my job, and that's about it. But I'm starting to get a sense of this won't be the last hurricane that hits my town. And so I've got to start to get educated. I've got to start to figure out how these things are interwoven, interconnected. And I've been hearing from others that there are skill sets that I can learn at the next level. Might take some work, but they would better prepare me to be present rather than checked out as I was after this hurricane. I don't know if this is reminding you all of the little story fragments that we put into the first 3 sessions, but we were following kind of the trajectory of this imaginary person who's trying to take care of their family best they can, and realizing that there are inner skills that can be expanded, capacities that can be expanded, so that I might be more of service to my family next time around, instead of so completely thrown off base. So last session was a bit of a deeper dive into these advanced skills. And I like to call them practices of reconnection. And if you'll recall, made a pretty big point mentioning at the center of this work is an assertion that I really came to as I wrote my book put it out in 2017, The Impossible Conversation. I was asking the question, what got us here? What got us globally into this predicament? Not just a problem which asks for solutions, but predicament that appears to have no solutions for us. And the answers kept coming back that we've disconnected. We've disconnected from all the primary sources of meaning and relationship in a human life. And so if we can continue that thread from last time, and a number of people were kind enough to share what your versions of practices are at that level, what you use to not just bring yourself back to center or back on track and get back to work, but something that expands your ability to see the interconnectedness, to interact with a world and all the way down to relationships that are indeed interconnected. It's a very different way of seeing and interacting with the world than we are all horribly polarized. And there are those group after group after group of others that we must never connect with because they're the source of the trouble, and so on and so on. So here we are at the last section, and this is also the last portion of the Paul Chafurka stages of awareness. And here, what I'm suggesting is we have an overlap with some of the advanced skills, the practices of reconnection. Let me just mention a couple of them. And I'd love for, if you would, start to think about what you would put on this advanced practices of reconnection list. Just samples from your world, what you're familiar with, things that perhaps you use in your own practices. I would mention that there's a great need in these advanced practices levels to be able to sit in circle with other people, to be able to be in a support group in a responsible and participative way, to be able to hold space for others, meaning you have the capacity to be in the presence of what another person brings, if they are feeling grief or if they're feeling anger and so on, that you have the capacity to be able to be with that person in that condition and they with you. So space holding, or a way to learn how to facilitate or at least be a strong participant in a number of types of groups. And it's one thing to do that with people that you know you get along with, know that you agree with. An advanced version of that is, how are your skills at sitting in a circle with people you don't agree with, that don't think like you, opine like you, might have different politics and so on. So there are quite a few advanced skills here that are immensely valuable in my experience. And I'm curious if anybody is sparked to mention any of your practices or advanced practices that you're aware of that seem to fit this bill. They seem to be appropriate to mention on a list. We could even start to put them in the chat if you'd like. Again, I've got that how to facilitate circles and groups of people, how to hold space for other people. Anything that y'all could mention, either on the individual practice or reconnecting with others or with Earth?
Shall I contribute?
Yeah, please.
Well, for me, it's what I do with DA, my Earth listening circles.
Yes.
I run Earth listening circles, and what they consist of is having a check-in, but then having a theme which is related to what is going on in the world or with the weather or whatever. And the theme then goes into a led meditation, which I lead. And then there's a silence where I get people to imagine they're going into their favorite part of nature with this particular issue in mind and discussing it with their favorite tree, or lying, and discussing it with the clouds, but actually literally discussing what the issue is and becoming just being aware of the interchange. And it is amazing. I mean, there's about 9 or 10 people come most weeks, and everybody gets something completely different, but it's so right for them, and often it's right for other people as well because they share in depth. So to me, I'd say listening to the earth, sharing what's going on for us and being aware of the symbolism. I mean, I can give an example. I was concerned about a trait of mine that seems to be almost out of balance. It's so strong. And I sit under a tree that has one branch that sticks out way beyond everything else. So I went and talked to the tree, actually in reality, not in a meditation. And the tree said, look around me. Yes, I've got this one branch that sticks out in a rather crazy fashion, but I've got lots of other branches doing relatively normal things. And the tree was saying to me, and so have you. Stop being so obsessed with this one angle of your personality, which for me is actually hyper anxiety. But it's like, hey, you've got lots of other good traits as well. And just that completely shifted my, oh my God, why am I so anxious? And of course, I mean, the why I'm so anxious is I'm an empath and I'm picking up on what's going on in the world.
Yes.
But that doesn't really help me. But the tree helped me by going, concentrate on some of your other branches.
Got it.
And it's that kind of dialogue that we can have with nature,
Yes.
which helps us.
Yes. So what I think I'm hearing, Emma Mary, is there at each of these substantial points of disconnection for us, our disconnection from deeper self, from others, from earth, and from soul. Each of those, and I'm just bringing up those as four ways to talk about it. I'm sure there are many others, but I'm hearing you say that each of those we could dive into any or all of them and find a rich choice menu of ways to connect in a deeper way. Unfortunately, our culture has other intentions for all of our attention. It seems like our attention is the coin of the realm. And what you're talking about seems to be a way to bring, consciously bring your attention back to that deep connection, that energetic connection with the earth and with that tree and with that moment. And really, it sounds like a rich result of just bringing your attention there.
And it's very much to do with deep listening. And to me, in our world, we don't listen. In our world, we're out there, we're changing, we're doing. We don't sit and listen. And this skill of being aware of something that you want to, get some clarity on, and then going into nature and being aware of what comes into your mind when you're still and trusting it. It's like a skill mix that we're not taught.
Right.
To listen to all sorts of things, the weather, the mountains.
Got it.
And I believe there is a lot more, there's answers to some of our unanswerable questions when we listen to the earth. I really believe that.
Very good. Thank you. Joe or Carol, do you have anything that you'd like to add to the list of practices that we could take on to reconnect?
Yeah, I think what I started to say, those words which is a piggybacking on just what she said, is presence. So my background's in developmental psychology, and reality is trans-rational or rational plus. So we're swimming in thinking. Cognitive is great, but it's only a tool to be used. And it's almost like, the Zen parable, where if the water is all, mucky and turbulent, well, best thing to do is let it all settle. So I think, by being present to what's happening within, so more attunement to my body, to my emotions, to my environment, to nature, to people around me. People do dream work. Like there's so many avenues that are informing us. Someone just put up center grounding, yes, and it's true. So I was a big fan, and I was involved with the work of Terry Patton, who unfortunately died last year. But I think I said this last time. We have to do the integrative work is doing the inner work, somewhat of a practice, a mindfulness, a presence, a contemplation, whatever it may be, in nature especially. Then work on the intersubjective work with your family, people around you, holding space, to be able to do the outer work. And certain people are doing big things in the world, and that's great. You may just be the best person on your block or the best gardener, or in other words, we all have a role to play in this. And we never know the effect of our actions. I go back to the line from the Bhagavad Gita: you have a right to your actions, but not your actions' fruits. So I believe if you're in alignment with Tao, with Buddha nature, God, whatever you name for it, it already is informing everything. Literally, it is the form of everything, and it's literally informing us. Or from the Christian sense, not my will, but thy will be done. So a lot of it is letting go.
Joe, I'm curious do you have any practices that you could mention that you have found valuable to get to the state you're talking about?
Yeah, listen, I've been a long time meditator, and I know there's a mindfulness movement out there, but that's not Buddhism. I mean, it's practical. So I would say find a path, or stay on your current path. So if it's Christian, look into the mystical Christian path, centering prayer, etc. Because all traditions have a transrational
Okay.
side. So, me personally, I think minimum 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes of night of just sitting in stillness,
Okay.
following breath, watching your thoughts, and realize, okay, what's watching? Who's the watcher? And you
Yeah.
also get a space of big mind. Like you realize that, like Alan Watts famously said, we are all just an aperture to which the universe experiences itself. I'm not separate from the universe. I am the universe in
Okay.
this unique form.
Got it.
So thank you, Dean, and everybody else.
Thank you. Carol, did you have anything that you'd like to add to a list of possible practices of reconnection?
Yeah, I find that for myself anyway, I try to do the daily centering prayer that Joe just mentioned. It's from Father Keating, Lawrence, and to do it a couple times a day would be ideal. Definitely out in nature, sitting outside. There is just something about that, whether it's a walking meditation or sitting. It's great. Even in winter,
Yeah.
there is just something about walking and the clouds and everything, and you just feel part of the bigger whole, and so you're not feeling as lost, perhaps in everything, kind of. So to me, those are some definite and practices that help. I
Got it.
think too that, probably journaling or connecting like in this way with people who have the same mindset as yourself, like that have it can kind of support you in
Mm-hmm.
things you're going through,
Mm-hmm.
and you can identify and not feel so alone and so out there. So those
Yes.
are, I think, good things, and probably that's about it.
Okay.
Thank. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks to each of you for those elements of both context and also practice. I put in a few words that I'd like to just underscore as we're exploring this more implicit, this larger scale backdrop in my experience is as we look at expanding from what is for many of us, this will be as good as it gets, is that we'll take on a certain number of these practices and will allow them to expand us and our capacities to be present in the face of larger and larger stressors, and hopefully to be able to be more and more of service to those we love in our life. It really gets down to that simple level for me of no matter what we're facing in terms of a daunting future or present, we um, really how it lives for me is, am I able to be present here? And am I able to be of service to those I love and perhaps to life? An extraordinary level of inner resourcing that's a far cry from back in the business as usual when we were first talking about the entry level for people who are just getting the kind of squidgy feeling that something's not quite right. The world can look desperately challenging. Literally, we're in a desperate situation there when people have almost no inner resources whatsoever. And that can look the only word that keeps coming to mind is desperate. And I keep getting this vivid image of the recent floods in Pakistan, where a third of the country has been flooded, and the millions and millions of people. And for the average person, no matter what country we're in, we aren't trained, we aren't taught how to have those kind of inner resources to call on, even at the most basic level. Now, at this level of the conversation, we're blessed to have 4 people on the screen who have a decent amount of access to some advanced self-regulation, advanced co-regulation, advanced resilience skills, advanced access to, again, this particular combination of states of being and inner resources that I often very fond of calling the implicit. And mostly it comes out of appreciating the work of Ian McGilchrist, and he sings the high praise of the balance of right and left hemisphere of the human brain. And when we are lucky enough to experience a more balanced, where we are seriously globally out of balance, I think you'd be the first to say, but to be able to experience a combination, a blend, an appropriate proportion of right and left hemisphere, which gives us access to the innate beauty of being alive. It's almost as if a gorgeous window is thrown open to have the fresh breeze come in of the miracle that it is to be able to be present with you in this call right now in this moment. That implicit is, in my experience, no matter which wisdom tradition we're talking about, no matter which access method we use, whether it's through earth relations or it's with relations with other people, these practices of reconnection give us access to that infusion of that breath of fresh air from the implicit. And that's what, for me, is the ultimate resource to tap into, no matter what the current doom scrolling prediction is for how screwed we all are, or how, whether it's environmental or economic or equity issues and so on. This seems to be access to an inner resource, a ubiquitous inner resource that is the only thing I've found so far that seems to be able to face quite easily even the most existential version of our predicament. And I'm curious if this rings a bell for any of you, in either from your direct experience or from an aspirational path that you are on. Do you have a sense of a felt sense of what I'm describing from in your words, from your lineage? Is this something that is that you were able to contact?
I'm happy to share that sometimes it appears to me that whatever we think of as our personal problem is often our biggest gift, and also our spiritual path. I've discovered that this high anxiety that I've always, I got it in the genes from my mother, if you want to go down that line. Mm-hmm. But recently I've discovered, I've worked all my life in psychiatric hospitals as a therapist, and I've suddenly become aware that I'm on this planet to digest and contain fear for the planet. So instead of me going, oh God, get to the doctor, get on anti-anxiety pills, it's like, no, this is my spiritual path. So whatever my particular, if someone has a problem with anger, or if someone has a problem with shyness. I mean, I have a friend who's terribly shy, but does a lot of inner work and writing. So it's like to be able to look on our personal traits as our spiritual, it's our dharma, it's what we've come to do. And it's completely changed my putting down of myself about my nervous nature.
Mm. It sounds like you've somehow found a role that you can play, so to speak, in this larger scale dynamic that includes the earth herself, life itself.
Yeah.
That you somehow have found a way to play a role that seems to blend into that circulation of life through the cycles of years and seasons and so on. Is that fair to say?
Yes, and the awareness that what we often think of as a problem, you know, maybe someone has always had financial problems, but they were meant to because it's given them a path where they do something else.
Mm-hmm.
Or for me, with a lot of anxiety problems all my life, it gave me the empathy to work with psychiatric patients.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most problems, psychiatric problems, come from fear. And so, but now that I'm obviously retired, it was like, oh God, you know, when am I going to get over this? No, you're not, because every time you feel it, you can take it in to the earth, you can meditate with it, you can digest the fear that's all around you and allow it to plant it in the earth and grow something beautiful.
Right. It's interesting, Emma Mary, when you're describing that particular process, it reminds me of a number of different traditions which have a similar process. The one that comes to mind in particular is Tonglen, way of processing, in this case, fear, and having it literally change, transmogrify, change into something else. So I so appreciate you sharing a bit of your practice and that shift of role. Thank you. I'm wondering, Carol or Joe, do you have a brief example of a way that you can connect with this implicit, or whatever you might call it, this larger backdrop that seems to be, for those who have found access, seems to give someone adequate inner resourcing, excuse me, to face even the largest existential level challenge that we might be experiencing. Anything that either of you could share from your own experience?
Well, I think obviously, you know, here's a good example, Dean. You created a container for like-minded, conscious people to meet, and you know, sometimes it's finding our tribes, finding, you know, because like you went through that ladder of awareness by Paul Chaverka. You know, as you progress up that ladder, like I think he was saying, when you get to stage 5, it's like 1 in 10,000 or 1 in 100,000 people. So, you know, I think the work that you're doing, the work that Michael Dowd is doing, the work that Jim Bendel is doing, if I had to make a recommendation to everybody, and your work is excellent, Dean, I am taking for the second time Theory U, Leading from the Emerging Future by Otto Scharmer, which he gives it free. I mean, free every 6 months. I think on the current iteration, there's, I don't know, 7,000 people globally taking it. And I think, why is it good? Because I think Otto has done a great job of merging the best of the East and the West with a process that you go through to take a prototype. So, we all may have something that we're trying to birth. Could be something simple, could be something larger, that you get to work in coaching circles, practicing that deep listening, that deep presencing,
Mm-hmm.
where things percolate up. And, so you're bringing your initiative, or your small prototype, a big prototype, to others and listening to them. But I think the other thing that I've been able to connect with a lot of people, they have ongoing hubs around the world, and they have hubs around every possible thing you could imagine. So I think by finding that community, hopefully we can find it local, because I think either consciously with people like us, or by rapidly changing life conditions, it's all going back to the local or the hyper local. I mean,
Yeah, it is.
it's
Yeah, it is.
it's like the famous line by John Michael Greer. So collapse now, plus avoid the rush.
You're right.
Right?
Joe,
The other
let me
person, yeah,
let me ask you to just pause there. Thank you very much for that. I absolutely respect the work of Theory U, and I very much appreciate you bringing up those threads. And we're getting down to our last few minutes, and I'm wondering if Carol, do you have anything that you'd like to add to a list of practices that access this particular state?
Well, I did like what you said about the Tongan one, just because I read up on Pema Chodron, on what he's offering, and that makes a lot of sense. It really does.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I wasn't sure 100% on the question, but when you look at someone like he lived in the Holocaust and wrote that book,
Viktor Frankl, Man's Search
yeah,
for Meaning.
like when you know that people have gone through really, really tough times,
Mm-hmm.
and I wouldn't say risen above it, but found a way to be able to go through it with some type of grace and some type of acceptance. I think that's a good one to do, to look to other leaders and wisdom people that have gone before, I guess, because we are not alone. We're not the only sufferers in the world, and never will be the only ones. And so I don't know whether that helps or not, but at least you can't have a small little pity party because everyone's in the same boat.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and so I don't know if that's what you were meaning or not, but that's about, yeah, it'd be nice to have a community
Mm-hmm.
around you in physical presence where you could
Yes.
gather. And I think that's where churches in the past have come together, whatever their faith. However, that doesn't mean necessarily that everyone's going to be on the same page.
Yeah.
And but you never know. As times get tougher, maybe people will
Yeah.
congregate more. I'm not sure. Hopefully.
Well, that
Thanks.
just I agree completely. And yes, Carol, you were right on track with what I was hoping that each of you would share, is just how you approach those larger scale inner resources. Where do you look for them? How do you access them? How do you presence yourself in a more profound way, as the pressures of life tend to be building to a greater level every day? So it'll be different for each of us, but it is clear to me also that this is a time to find our people. For many of us, this is as good as it's going to get, being on Zoom. That's just how it's going to be. And if we're lucky, I'm really looking forward to the day when I can have a face-to-face group again, local to where I am. That's really what I grew up with. That's what I cut my teeth in, so to speak. And so I so appreciate each of you sharing from your own perspective and your own path in this way. These are extraordinary times, and they call for us accessing the highest level resources, inner and external, that we can find. And ideally, if we can find kindred spirits with whom we can walk the path, all the better. So this is the last of the introductory sessions for this work of living resilience. And these 4 sessions will be posted in a little mini course in our community space, the Living Resilience community space. And how to get to that community space, the information will be in the show notes here in this episode. And this will be just the kind of toe in the door of exposure to this body of work. There will be lots of elements. Many of the words that were ended up in our chat today about trust and about sense making, about shadow awareness, and about space holding. Each of these elements will have a special focus series, and there'll be a special focus group that if you're interested in wanting to find some folks to sharpen those skills together, all of those will be available and are available now. And again, I just thank you all for being a part of this kind of spontaneous combustion of 4 brief introductory sessions to talk about offering resources and support at whatever level a person approaches these times, these troubled times. And so thank you all very much. Okay, Emma Mary, bye-bye.
Keep on keeping on, Dean and my good friends. Bring
All
your
right.
best to everything you do.
Thank you very much. I shall do. I really appreciated you, Joe, and you, Carol, being here on the call today. And I'll see you next time.